Today, our topic of discussion is political ideology. Political ideology is the term which has become popular in the study of political science in the last 200 years. Political ideology has developed through lots of upheavals, socio-economic and political, through which modern world has taken shape, and it is intimately related to the continuous process of political development and social change. It has emerged first in the industrialized Western world, but very soon it has become the common global language of the political discourse. Like many other concepts of political science, political ideology as a concept also suffers from the same problem, that is, the problem of any unanimous definition. In the name of definition, what we get in case of political ideology is the collection of some opposite views. David McClellan has pointed out political ideology is probably the most elusive term in the study of political science. But grossly what we can say that in the initial days, political ideology was used in a negative sense as a political weapon to condemn and criticize opposite views and ideas. It was in much later period, around the second half of the 20th century, the neutral and the objective understanding of political ideology has emerged. Now, if we look at the discussion of Andrew Hewitt, we will find that he tried to enlist all those important concepts and dimensions which we can indicate through political ideology. By following Andrew Hewitt, we can identify these important issues which are included within the discussion of political ideology. These are like, number one, a political ideology is a political belief system. Number two, it is an action-oriented set of political ideas. Number three, it is the idea of the ruling class. Number four, it is the worldview of a particular class or a group of the society. Number five, political ideology articulates interest of a particular section of the society. Number six, it propagates a kind of false consciousness, particularly amongst the oppressed or exploited. Number seven, it helps to situate individual within the social context and thus also helps to develop a sense of collective belongingness within the individual. Number eight, it is officially sanctioned set of ideas through which political rule is legitimized. Number 9, it is an all-embracing political ideas which often claims monopoly of truth. And number 10, it is the combination of abstract as well as highly systematic set of political idealism. It is equally elusive to trace the origin of the usage of the term. Scholars have pointed out roughly it was around the time of French Revolution when the use of political ideology has started. French scholar Arthur de Tracy has used the term around the year 1796. According to Tracy, he came to the conclusion that as different social enquiries are based on ideas, ultimately political ideology will emerge as the queen of all sciences. The most important contribution in this initial stage was made by Marx and Marxist scholars. Marx used the term political ideology from a different perspective, and he was so much influenced by the term that he used the term in his one of famous book. The name of the book is The German Ideology, published in the year 1846. Marx's own understanding of ideology is totally different from the other understanding of ideology. It has some distinctive features. First of all, according to Marx, political ideology is about delusion and mystification. According to Marx, political ideology gives us a false view about the reality. It develops a kind of false consciousness. He has even made a distinction between ideology and science, science being real and based on truth, whereas ideology is unreal and false understanding of reality. The second principle or second understanding of Marx about political ideology is that ideology always connected with the concept of class. According to Marx, very clearly speaking, ideology is the set of ideas and beliefs of the ruling class. It is their own perception and interest reflected through the set of ideology. For example, Marx said liberalism is the political ideology of the ruling capitalist class and it claims universal right for all. But in reality, these rights are only enjoyed by the proletariat class. The third understanding of Marx about political ideology is that political ideology is the manifestation of power and it is connected with the power of the ruling class. According to Marx, as political ideology is nothing but set of ideas and theories of the ruling class, it is bound to be connected with the manifestation of power. But it is always under disguise. Political ideology helps to disguise the relationship between exploited and exploiter. The fourth principle or fourth understanding of Marx about political ideology is that, according to him, political ideology is temporary. As it is connected with the class system, according to Marx, with the abolition of the class system, ideology will also become irrelevant. So, according to Marx, in a socialist and a communist political system where there will be no division between class and there will be no class struggle, ideology will be redundant. After Marx, some of the Marxist scholars have made important contribution in the growth of the political ideology in this initial stage. Among them, two most important names are Lenin and Antonio Gramsci. Lenin published his book What is to be Done in 1902, and in this book he considered Marxist philosophy as socialist ideology or Marxist ideology, which would have been absurd for Marx himself. Marx made the distinction between ideology and science and considered his own theory as science, not as an ideology. But on the other hand, Lenin abolished this distinction between theory and science, and he said there is no connection between political ideology and falsification and mystification. He said ideology can also be scientific. He has further pointed out that every class could have their own set of beliefs and ideas and thinking process, irrespective of their ruling position. Thus, Lenin considered Marxist understanding of socialism as scientific socialism. The next important contribution in this regard made by Antonio Gramsci around mid of 1930s. Gramsci coined the term or used the term hegemony in explaining the control of the capitalist ruling class over the society. According to Gramsci, it is not only the coercion, but it is through hegemony the ruling class continues its rule. Now, hegemony means dominance and leadership. And according to Gramsci, hegemony includes lot of aspects regarding political ideologies. This ideology is reflected at the multi-level of the society, starting from education system, everyday language, popular art, culture, media, etc. And he said this bourgeois hegemony can be only controlled with the emergence of a counter-hegemony. The counter-hegemony is the proletariat hegemony, and this proletariat hegemony will be based on the socialist ideology, that is socialist principle, values and ideas. Apart from this Marxist contribution, if we focus on the non-Marxist contribution, we will get the name of German scholars Karl Mannheim. He wrote a book in the year 1929, Ideology and Utopia. And in this book, he tried to explain what is political ideology. Like Marx, Karl Mannheim also believed that political ideology is a set of ideas or beliefs shaped by the social circumstances. But unlike Marx, he had not accepted such a negative role of political ideology. So what he said political ideology is set of ideas or beliefs that are used to defend a particular set of political system. He made a distinction between two types of political ideology as well. These two types are particular ideology and total ideology. According to Mannheim, particular ideologies are those set of ideas and values which are connected with a particular section of the society or a particular class. Whereas total ideology is the worldview, which is ideas and the beliefs of a total society or a specific period of history. He has further pointed out all ideologies are distorted because ideologies are partial and self-interested view of reality. Some other scholars like Karl Popper, Hannah Arendt, J.L. Talmon, Bernard Crick also have used the term ideology in a very restrictive way. According to them, ideology refers to a closed system which often claims the monopoly of truth and which has a very low level of patience or tolerance about the opposite and rival views and ideas. 1960 onwards, the concept of political ideology began to change. A more neutral and objective understanding of political ideology emerged during this time. In this regard, important contribution is made by German scholar Martin Seeliger. Martin Seeliger defined political ideology as set of ideas or thoughts that justifies the ends and the means of a collective social action, irrespective of the fact that whether that action is aimed to dislocate, replace, rebuild or amend an existing political system. Thus, his understanding of political ideology is absolutely action-oriented. And as it is action-oriented, so it could be at the same time right or wrong, true or false, liberating or oppressive, scientific or not so scientific. This kind of neutral objective understanding of political ideology is also criticized by many other scholars. According to them, this kind of understanding actually gives birth of a blunt and very generalized understanding of political ideology, and thus it lacks the critical edge. So, from this above discussion, what we can say about political ideology is it includes three things. Number one, political ideology provides a worldview. Number two, political ideology gives a model about a good society. And number three, political ideology gives a justification from the movement or a journey from A to B, that is, a worldview into a good society. A political ideology is based on two syntheses, a synthesis between understanding and commitment, theory and practice. Political ideology provides an intellectual mapping within a social system or context. As a result, it is based on both facts and values. There is another important dimension of political ideology. It is the dimension of fundamental and operational level. At the fundamental level, every ideology is like political philosophy, based on abstract political theories and ideas. At the operational level, every political ideology is based on political movement. It is like including issues of public mobilization and struggle for power. Thus, in every ideology, there are two aspects. One is idea-oriented, another is action-oriented. Ideology is a combination of these both. But there are some ideologies which are good at one level than the other. For example, we can say fascism as an ideology is more important in its action-oriented understanding than its idea-oriented perspective. On the other hand, anarchism is another ideology which is more important and more relevant from the idea-oriented understanding than as an action-oriented practice. Now, we will focus on the attempt of typological division of political ideology. There are some scholars who try to make a typology of different sorts of political ideologies. The most common typological categorization is made under the name of linear spectrum. Linear spectrums talks about two extreme pole, left and right pole, which is joined by a line with a middle position. the left pole or the left wing and the right pole and the right wing, and there is a centrist position called the centrist wing. In the left pole, we get ideologies like socialism, communism, etc. Whereas in the right pole or right wing, we get ideologies like fascism, totalitarianism, and at the center or the middle position, we get ideological position like liberalism. Along with this popular linear spectrum, we also get horseshoe spectrum, horizontal and vertical axis spectrum, etc. However, all of these spectrums or categorization or typological attempts are criticized by scholars because these are all oversimplified and very general. Political ideology is actually a very complex and critical set of ideas and beliefs, so they cannot be generalized in such specific bracket. Giddens has further pointed out that there are inclusion of many new perspectives like animal rights, feminist movement, environmental perspective, etc. And with these inclusion in modern days, it is impossible to make such an attempt to divide ideology under only few brackets or heads. Now we will focus on the political ideology and its challenges in the 21st century. If we do not discuss this particular part, our discussion of political ideology will remain incomplete. Political ideology has emerged 200 years before, and it has passed through these 200 years with many changes. But in this 21st century, it has been facing several changes and challenges at the same time. According to scholars, in last 200 years, for say, it was from the time of the fall of Bastille, around 1789, till the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall, that is around 1989. In these last 200 years, world history, politics and economy had a continuity. It was something more certain, and it was under some basic control than it is at present in the 21st century. According to scholars, the 21st century is marked by a rapid speeding up process which is very much shapeless and extremely uncertain. In this background, political ideology has been facing several changes as well as challenges. We can categorize these changes and challenges under three basic heads. Number one, the changes that have occurred in the world politics after the end of Cold War, that is called the emergence of the new world order. Number two, the emergence of the postmodernity and all sorts of post-isms. And number three, globalization and its impact. The first important change is thus the change that has occurred in the newly developed world order. After the end of the Second World War, the whole world continued for 45 years on the basis of the Cold War, the war between two blocs, the socialist and the capitalist, under the leadership of USSR and USA respectively. The history of mankind from 1945 or 1950 till 1990-1991 was the history of Cold War. It was very predictable and it was very fixed from the perspective of political as well as economic analysis. That has come to a total halt with the collapse of the socialist regime and the collapse of Soviet Russia as well as Eastern world. With the collapse of communism and socialism, it is not only an end of a system, but it was also end of an ideology. And it marked the ultimate winning position of the ideology of capitalism. As a result, according to many scholars, there is no scope of any ideological controversy anymore after the end of Cold War, because it was the emergence of capitalism that is ultimate. But some other scholars have pointed out some counter ideologies also has emerged during this phase, like ethnic nationalism, global terrorism and religious fundamentalism, which have been challenging the present world situation. The second change or the challenge that political ideology has been facing in this 21st century is postmodernity and post-ism. We have already discussed that political ideology has emerged through a series of social movements and upheavals that has shaped the modern world. As a result, there is a connection of the core in between political ideology and the modern world. Liberalism, fascism, Marxism, all these ideological stand bears all the basic premises of the modernity. Now, postmodernity is the stand or political ideology that has emerged in 1960s and 1970s by challenging the modernity. As a result, postmodernism challenges not only the basic premises of modernity, but the ideological stands related to modernity. As a result, political ideology has been facing challenges on behalf of postmodernity. Postmodernity instead believes on lifestyle and identity. And thus, what we can see a series of growth of post-ism like post-feminism, post-Marxism, post-liberalism in the recent era. The third challenge to the process of political ideology is globalization. Globalization is an economic process that has culminated after the end of Cold War, though the process has started immediately after the end of Second World War. But the thing is that in present 21st century, globalization has putting severe challenges in front of political ideology in different ways. Firstly, globalization does not accept the existence of nation state, and thus ideology related to nationalism and nation state and sovereignty are facing severe challenges in front of globalization. Number two, the second challenge given by globalization is that as a process, it is not ideology neutral. Globalization is a process which reflects the principle of neoliberalism, and thus political ideology in general is coping up with the challenges given by neoliberal philosophy. And number three, globalization has given birth of different opposite understandings and ideological stands. As a result, what we can see in this post-Cold War period, there is a series of growth of counter-ideological stand like religious fundamentalism, particularly from the Islamic world, ethnic nationalism, particularly from the East European countries, and obviously global terrorism connected with this both stands. Now we will focus on the concept of end of ideology. End of ideology is a concept that has become fashionable after 1960s. Daniel Bell, he published a book, The End of Ideology, in 1960, and he used this term and popularized the concept. According to Daniel Bell, after the end of Second World War, ideological clash and the importance of ideology both have come to an end. After Second World War, all the parties have compromised on the basis of their ideological stand, and it is now only economy on which they are fighting. In other words, he said that economy has triumphed over politics. Every party is trying to ensure an affluent society instead of morally and ethically good society. He further joined a particular part in his book under the name Afterwards in 1988, where he further elaborated his understanding, and he said industrialized world has reached to the stage called post-industrial society. They are also marked by him as information society, and this society is under the control of the knowledge class, and this is the ultimate elite class of this society. There are some truth in Daniel Bell's understanding, no doubt of that, but at the same time, it is not the whole story. Scholars have pointed out when Bell developed his theory of end of ideology, at the same time, that is during 60s and 70s, lot of ideological changes and development happened in countries like Soviet Russia, China, and many of the developing third world countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So, Bell's concept of end of ideology cannot be accepted as a whole. So, from this discussion, what we can see and what we can say that no doubt, in the 21st century, different challenges have come up in front of political ideology, in the name of globalization, in the name of postmodernity, or in the name of end of ideology. But one important thing is that all these challenges have come in form of political ideology only. Political ideology, in other words, can be challenged only through a set of political ideas and theories and beliefs, which is another name of political ideology. So as long as political ideology is there, all the challenges towards political ideology is bound to come through the set of ideas and theories. And the clashes among these political ideologies does not mark the demise of political ideology. Rather, it ensures the continuous unending process of the growth of political ideology. So, what we can conclude that as long as political science is there, political ideology will also survive and continue because it provides the route map through which individual and scholars try to contextualize the socio-political event in reality.